It's official. We are less than 6 weeks away from one of the most unique openers in college football, Kansas State versus Iowa State in Dublin. So today we're back at the position groups. We're breaking it down the right way in the trenches. We'll look at the defensive line for both teams, where things stand going into fall camp, and how those units will shape in this week 0 showdown right here on Farmageddon Friday.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Boom! Hit me with that beat, Nick. It's Farmageddon Friday, Locked On College Crossover with Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Cyclones. I'm Christian Rauh here with Nick Marovets, bringing you this kind of unique coverage every single Friday, all the way up to August 23rd, all the way up to week 0, all the way up to the beginning of the college football season. This is going to be an exciting one. We're back talking positional groups. It's going to be a good time. And of course, if you are maybe a little worried about certain things and maybe, you have to really about some money issues, well, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Something you don't have to worry about, at least on both sides of the football here, is how good these defensive lines are. These defensive fronts are really interesting. I think they're going to be one of the pinnacles, one of the focal points in the week 0 showdown in Dublin, especially if weather's involved. There's just a lot to talk about on this one, and I'm glad we saved the defense for last because I think there's a lot more deep, unique questions that we have to ask about the defense. It's easy to talk about the offense. Everyone talks about the offense, but not everyone's talking about these defensive linemen, these pass rushers, some that make some of the biggest impacts in football games, especially in Big 12 play. So, Nick, we got a lot to talk about. And in segment 3 today, we're going to talk about this wild idea that needs to stop the count as well. 30 teams in the college football playoff. I don't know. We got to talk about that one as we finish up this episode of Farmageddon Friday. But let's get into Iowa State's defensive front first. Nick, I want you to break this one down for us. Let's start in Ames, because if you followed Iowa State under Matt Campbell, you know that the defensive line has set the tone. It really has. Campbell told the Des Moines Register, I believe it was right after media days or during media days, that this group has, quote, really interested. And he said that there's competition, there's talent, there's hunger. And he didn't sound like he was sugarcoating it. He sounded really confident about this group. So break it down. What is the first things that come to your mind about this defensive front?
Well, I mean, this defensive front I expect to be significantly better than last season. I think that's really where I want to start with this group. Now, is that like a major accomplishment? Not necessarily. I honestly thought the defensive line last year was pretty lackluster for Iowa State. Arguably their weakest kind of angle, if you will, just like what they were doing, secondary, all the aspects of the offense, which parts of the defense were the weakest, which parts of the team were the weakest. I thought it was the defensive line. I think that there is definitely room for improvement. So what I'm looking at right now, I think it's absolutely going to exceed what they did last year. However, that being said, how much is the question? I think they're going to be very, very good. Obviously, the return of Big Citrus, of Dom Orange, is one that I think a lot of people are extremely excited about. A guy that has the ability to absolutely wreck games and make enormous plays. I mean, that's kind of what he's known for. The question is how often he can do that, and that's what was kind of addressed at the end of last season going into this year for Orange. And so I think if he can address that specific problem and get that level of consistency up, throughout the game, looking more at, I would say maybe even double the amount of plays. I think it was like something like 30-ish plays was what we were kind of getting from him last year, maybe. Not exactly sure what the number was. The point is, we're going to see a lot more production from Orange here. And across the board, Orange was at Big 12 Media Days and pointed out a few names: Elijah Carnell, Jace Gilbert, Ike is what they were calling him. Iziogo, I'm going to totally mess up his last name as well, but at 6'5", 270, it doesn't really matter because he's tearing up the field. I think what we've got right now in-house is unbelievable, and tamatoa McDonough from Yale is also another guy that I'm super excited about. Across the board, I think this Iowa State defensive line is significantly better than last season.
Probably should go on record that this is like an all-name position group for both Iowa State and Kansas State. So there will probably be a time where we mess up a name on this episode. It is not on purpose. I apologize. I even have the media guide up, and I probably will mess it up for Kansas State. So you mentioned a lot of names, Nick. Obviously, there was Orange, who was at media days. He mentioned a lot of other players. Who do you think the tone setter is going to be? The guy that Kansas State absolutely has the game plan for in week 0 in Dublin?
I feel like I'm not allowed to answer this. Like, I don't want Kansas State to see this and be like, that's who it is.
Are you on? Oh, you're on the payroll. Is that what you're trying to say?
I mean, I wish I was. That's for certain. Because, this is one that I don't know if a lot of people are going to pick this guy. This is kind of the same thing as what we were talking about with the tight ends. Remember, I kept saying like Cooper Alexander. I'm going tamatoa McDonough from Yale. I am very excited to see what he can do for Iowa State. Dominated the Ivy Leagues. And Dom Orange at media days said that he is, quote, a specimen. That's not a title that just gets thrown around. Said he moves well, he moves smooth. So just based on that, I mean, the size of tamatoa McDonough, and honestly, the smoothness of the name. Like, what a name. I have no doubt in my mind. Exactly. This kid could be absolutely electric for Iowa State. Will he be the tone setter against Kansas State? I think so. But it obviously could be Dom Orange coming back with a little bit of a vengeance, fresh at the beginning of the season, wanting to basically the reason he's coming back is to put out good tape. And if you don't put out good tape in game 1, like, what's the rest of the season look like? So it could be either one of those two. I am leaning McDonough though.
Well, depth's always a big strength of Iowa State. That's something that we've known. Depth's a big win at both of these schools, in my opinion. And you're talking about a guy that could potentially not be the main guy. You said a lot of people might not say that. So when you think of potential second line or breakout names, you bring up him. That's quite interesting. And coming from Ivy League, going to the Power 4, that's quite a step. So we'll see what he can do from there. Where does this unit stack up compared to the Cyclones of the past, maybe 2023 or getting to the Big 12 championship in 2024? Where would you say this unit stacks up? You weren't very high on them last year, although you still found a way to battle for Dr. Pepper. Do you feel a little bit more confident, just like Campbell does, in this group heading into the new season?
Absolutely. I think that this group is going to shine for multiple reasons. On their own, I think that they're going to get to the quarterback, disrupt rushing lanes, things like that, just general defensive line stuff. But I do think that this group in particular has the ability to kind of be known as maybe one of the best groups that Iowa State's had, at least in a while, right? There's going to be some names that are thrown out from Iowa State. They're just better, potentially. We don't know exactly what this unit's going to look like. I'm not saying that there aren't any superstars on this line, but I am saying that we don't know yet. That being acknowledged, the linebacker group, unbelievable. I don't think we've talked about the linebackers yet. I believe that's next week. And the secondary could be very, very good for Iowa State. And I think that the whole defense complementing each other is going to lend towards this, holy cow, Iowa State's defensive line really making a lot of noise this year. It's kind of the whole unit, it's kind of the whole defense. I think Iowa State's defense as a whole is going to be significantly better than years past. And that will essentially kind of give the illusion that the defensive line is very, very good as well. Now, the defensive line could be, a 50 sack a game defensive line too. Like, I'm not saying that they won't be unbelievable. I think they have the capability to absolutely wreck games. But I think when you take the whole entire defense into account, it's like, yeah, this defensive line is going to fit in very, very well and will definitely have the perception of a strong point. And that's going to be something we have to evaluate as the season goes on. Like, is it actually a strong point, or is it maybe just that the whole defense is really good? Well, I guess we'll see.
Well, I'm glad you said strong point. Let's wrap that up, and I'll kind of put that all together in a nice little bow as we finish up this segment. When you look at Kansas State's offensive line, right, especially with some turnover last year, but they did have a great transfer portal pickup, and Coach Kleiman's already talking about they found their new left tackle already in George Fitzpatrick. They talked about him being already crushing it in the spring, coming over from the national champions, Ohio State. There's a lot of interesting moves when it comes to the offensive line of Kansas State, but still some question marks of who is going to be on that offensive line. How do you think that Iowa State front matches up with this Kansas State offensive line, and where do you see them being more at a strength? Do you think they're going to have more of a good stopping of the run, or do you think they're going to do a really good job maybe on the exteriors of the pass rush getting to Avery Johnson, a dual threat quarterback, might I remind you?
Yeah, Avery Johnson, would you say is the 24-mile-an-hour club?
23. Yeah, I think I said
23?
24 at once, but I was mistaken. It's 23, which is still impressive.
Still unreal, very, very fast. And so, yeah, I don't know exactly where if I had to guess, I would say it's going to be in the run game, as far as advantage, run or pass. I do think that they're going to disrupt the game, set the edge. I think we're going to maybe see some movement kind of between who's where on the line. I don't know if we're going to have like a true left outside linebacker type of dude, or a left edge, if you will. I think there will be some movement. And so it'll be it is the first game of the season too, right? Like you got to take that into account. And I guess I'm not exactly sure how rigid they're going to be in their game plan. Against Kansas State, I think Iowa State matches up well. I think they have the size. I think they can clog those running lanes really, really well. And effectively, my guess is they're going to force Kansas State, to throw, especially if it's going to be dirty weather over there. I think that's the play. And I think that they can do that very well.
Always seems like Iowa State reloads up front without missing a beat, in my opinion. If this group gets clicking early, that's going to be huge. A huge test for Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards and the rest of Kansas State. And that offense that's still building chemistry in the offensive line that we know still have questions heading in the fall camp. Let's flip the switch here. Let's go over and talk about the Wildcats, how that defensive front can stop Rocco Beck and the rest of that Iowa State Cyclones in Dublin, August 23rd, the first game of the college football season. We'll do that next right here on Farmageddon Friday. But first, Nick, let's talk about our friends at Monarch Money. And I know it's your friend for sure, young whippersnapper Nick Marovets here. Ever wishing that managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether growing your savings, planning for a big purchase, maybe trying to find yourself a big TV, one that's not sitting next to your foot, right? Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your financings. One surprise that I just bought a house. One surprise that helped me with sharing with Monarch Money was I got to track my spending with Monarch. I found out that I was spending way too much money on food delivery. Now I really have to worry about having my expenses set back and focused now that I'm paying attention to having multiple rooms in this house and taking care of lots of things. Monarch Money has definitely helped with that. So if you're like me that's buying a new house or needs some help with just savings on the regular, or looking for a new TV like Nick, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year.
So Iowa State's defensive line is, I think, a strong suit as far as the defense goes for just the Cyclones in general. The linebackers are going to be very good. The secondary are going to be very good. But the defensive line is kind of where it all starts, right? You win and lose games in the trenches. Where is Kansas State at in this whole thing? Because Iowa State's offensive line is something that it seems to be a lot of coaches are very, very excited about this. Matt Campbell being one of them, right? Can Kansas State keep up? Do they have the size? Do they have the speed? Do they have the strength to keep up with Iowa State's offensive line and try, keyword try, to win this game over in Dublin?
Size, yes. Strength, absolutely. Speed, I think that's where we're going to find the question mark there. I think that is, if any of the three factors you brought up, that's probably the one that you have to look for in fall camp and hope that it translates well in the Dublin. Look, I think the biggest thing that I took from when talking about the defense as a whole, this is the first time that you and I are having a conversation post-media days, right? We're jumped back into this position group here. The biggest takeaway I took from looking at the holistic view of the Kansas State Wildcats defense is that the offense is well ahead of the defense. So that is something that needs to be taken care of in fall camp, a shortened fall camp. Yes, you start early, and I know you're in the same boat as we are, but it's still a shortened fall camp as they head to Dublin and do the overnight flight, and yet there's a lot of things they have to deal with. So when I'm thinking about this defense as a whole, that is on my forefront. And then obviously you get into the trenches, you have to worry about depth, you worry about injuries, you worry about all that stuff. And, oh, by the way, can you find a way to get to the quarterback? Now, I think this is an interesting spot for them to start week 0 against Iowa State, a team that is got some question marks at the wide receiver room, which we've talked about in the past. So if the pass rush of Kansas State can start off strong week 0 against Rocco Beck, great quarterback, don't get me wrong, but who is trying to find these relationships with these new quarterbacks after throwing 167 targets to 2 wide receivers that play in the NFL now, I think you could really see a huge momentum shift from Kansas State. And what's wild to me is that you would talk about who's going to be the major defensive ends in this group. You got Tobi Tsunami, you got Chidi Obizor, which are long, twitchy, disruptive guys, great against the run as well. Had some good pass rushes, had some sacks last season. But at media days, right, when it came to the pass rush, Chris Kleiman, his teammates, even players from other positions were hyping up Ryan Davis, this breakout star that they think is incoming. He didn't go to media days. He still may have been the most talked about player on the team, though. And Chris Kleiman said that he is, quote, the most underrated guy on the roster. And insiders believe that he could be a household name by the end of 2025. So if you add that all with the other players on the edge and then add in Travis Bates and Cody Stufflebeam, who's pushing into the rotation, I think the third down pressure or setting the edge in the outside zones, things like that, these guys are going to rotate in fresh and fast. And I think that's where we're going to see some increased greatness when it comes to Kansas State. Because like you, although I think that the defensive front has always been very good at Kansas State for the most part, I think there was a step back last year, especially on the edge. So they didn't really bring anybody in to make that happen. Now, there is one freshman, Jason Ross, from Alabama, an Alabama transfer, who could be an absolute unit. Who knows? But for the most part, I think we're going to get a lot of returning players. It just looks like they've all took a step up for where they're going to be. So I'm really excited for this defensive end group, but don't you worry. My eye is going to be glued, probably more than any other position on the defense. I take that back. I think corner might actually be that because of all the players that left to the NFL draft. Second most position I pay attention to when it comes to fall camp is what's going on with this edge rush.
Okay. I did not expect the super high praise from Klein. Like that's
it was most underrated. I wasn't ready for it either. I was not ready for that name to pop up. Like I did an episode in the past about the defensive ends. I don't think I brought his name up once. So
wow. So keep an eye out. Keep an eye out for him. I am curious, returners is a big deal. Arizona State returns, I believe, the most starters in the Big 12. A lot of people, as the Big 12 champion, are taking them as like either, top one, top two in this league. Those returners on the defensive line that you're talking about, I'm curious, what can they do this year differently than last year to elevate their game? Because Dom Orange for Iowa State, he's coming back. He's got to change a few things to get better. There are some things on the field, but for him, it is more just about like playing more snaps at 100%. Like you just got to give effort more during the game. He's very solid at what he does, but he just doesn't do it as much. Where do you think this sits for the Kansas State line for those guys returning? What can they do differently this season? However you want to take this question, to be completely honest, to elevate their game in comparison to last year.
Honestly, I would mostly agree with what you have to say right there, and just about effort, and it's about consistency. When you talk about the pass rush and the defensive interior of Kansas State, look, the secondary got exposed a lot last season, and we like to blame the secondary. But when you look back at it, hindsight and big picture, multiple players from that secondary were drafted in the 3rd and 5th round of the NFL draft. It wasn't those players that were the only issue. We were putting them on an island. We were having some issues when that came, whatever the case may be. It was because of the lack of pressure, and we'll get to the linebacker talk next week as well. I think there was obviously some woes and some speed issues there as well, which we'll talk about next week. But on the defensive front side, I've already kind of got to the pass rush. They have to get there faster. They got to be more consistent. They can't take plays off. They got to make sure that they're getting to the quarterback, or at least getting pressure on the quarterback every single play, and fast, not getting the secondary, a chance for the wide receivers to get away from them. Make sure that the separation doesn't happen because there's so much pressure right away. It's just impossible for separation to occur. In the interior defensive line, and I think running, especially if there's inclement weather, running game Kansas State, for some reason, stopping the run when there's any type of inclement weather, and I'm looking right at an Iowa State guy who knows exactly what I'm talking about, Farmageddon a few years ago in the snow. For some reason, it just doesn't work out. And we're going to Dublin, Ireland, and you think about the potential rain that could happen there. But Uso Samalu, again, I'm probably butchering these names, and I apologize so much, but he's the anchor in the middle, at least one of the anchors in the middle. There's a lot of veteran presence coming back for Kansas State in the defensive front. He's a former starter. He lost his job last year, but now I think he's back and better than ever. Coaches say that this was his best offseason yet. So we're getting a lot of hype from this defensive front. And he's moving bodies again, which is great. His presence at defensive tackle allows those edge rushers to get wide and hunt, which is exactly what you need when you're looking for that pass rush. I will say this, when it comes to the defensive front, when it comes to the edge rush and the defensive tackle, I want to see more. And I want to see more storylines, some more film in fall camp to see if it's really the true statement. And we're probably not going to get that until we actually see it live week 0. But I'm going to hold back a little bit. And I might be playing this too safe, but there's been a lot of hyperbole over the last couple weeks of this media days of how great everybody's best shape of my life season, right? So I think we're in that point. The defensive front is what makes me like, all right, hang on a second. Let me hold back. So I want to see what we see from fall camp. But either way, I got to see consistency. I got to see more effort. If that happens, we don't have to worry about the issues of secondary. The speed of the linebackers probably don't matter either, which we'll talk about next week. But lots of things here. But I agree with you. Consistency and effort.
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about the impact that the line has on the secondary, it's kind of similar to the offensive line and the quarterback. If anyone's played college football 26, the offensive line, really, really rough. Makes your quarterback look like he doesn't know what he's doing out there. He's just throwing the ball around. No, these groups all are synergistic. They all act together, offensive line to quarterback to wide receivers. It's a team game, secondary to linebackers to defensive line. We'll see how it all plays out. The question is, if Kansas State didn't even send out a defensive line at all, didn't even send out one of them, could they make a 30-team college football playoff? I guess we'll find out coming up right after this.
Not going to lie, Nick, had no idea what you were doing with that one at that end segment there with no defensive line at the end. That was some crazy college football 26 talk in your mind. But perfect time. Let's pivot over to the biggest talking point out of SEC media days that just happened over the last couple days. And it didn't come from Kirby Smart, didn't come from Lane Kiffin, didn't come from Tennessee trying to poach Avery Johnson or Rocco Beck. It came from Eli Drinkwitz, the Missouri head coach, who floated the idea of a 30-team college football playoff when you factor in auto bids and play-in games. And this is what he argued. And let's go ahead and try to be reasonable here, but this is what he argued. He said the NFL takes 44% of teams, 32 teams, 44% makes the NFL playoffs. A 12 or 16 team college football still only gives you about a 10% access to the entire college football pool if you include the G5, independents, things like that. So why not open it up more? And he says, quote, 30 fan bases excited, 30 programs with access. Nick, I'm going to start with you. When you saw this, what was your gut reaction to 30-team college football playoff?
I feel like every time I see one of these things, I'm like, man, I just wanted a roller coaster of emotions. Maybe that's just who I am. I'm not entirely sure because I see 30 teams and I'm like, this is ridiculous. What are we talking about? Then I read his argument. And I'm like, that does actually kind of make sense. Then I come back down to earth and I'm like, 30 teams? Jiminy creaminy. Why aren't we just having the entire season be a bracket? I just like, what is the limit? And that's exactly what we were talking about when we expanded from 4 to 12. Immediately, the conversation was, well, we know we're not stopping at 12. So why did we even go to 12? What is this little checkpoint that we're doing here? I don't understand. Okay, so we're going to 16 or 14 or whatever it is. As soon as that goes into effect, 32 is on the table. Why not just double it from 16? Like, honestly, it's crazy, but is it that far-fetched? Like, is that not possible in the next 10 to 15 years? I don't love it. But I don't think it's impossible.
I don't like the argument of saying, well, basketball does it, because basketball can play more than once in a week. I don't think you can do that with college football. Maybe you can play every 5 days. Maybe, like you can play on a Saturday and maybe a Thursday. That's still pushing it, in my opinion, when you're trying to get ready for prep and heal. It's a different kind of world compared to college basketball. So I don't see how it's logical unless you're going to try and play until March. And then if you do, then college basketball on both men's and women's, it's not going to get any coverage anywhere. I mean, after the bowl games, after the national championship and the first week of January, it's all college basketball season for February and March and a little bit of April. And that's where they get all that revenue. So if college football takes that over, then you would either have to push away from revenue and NIL, especially with this new revenue cap of giving money to basketball schools or basketball programs, or push the basketball schedule to the right. So there's a lot of logistic things I just don't think would work out with a 30 or 32 team playoff. Unless they shortened the college football season, unless they started more to the left, maybe they started at the beginning of August instead of the end of August. That might make more sense. But either way, it's wild to me. But let's just play devil's advocate. Let's say it happens. Let's say we get 30 teams. Good old Eli gets his wish come true. And would this help teams like Kansas State or Iowa State stay in the national conversation with like an 8-4, 9-3 season like they've had over the past couple seasons? I know you got your first double-digit win in the past, but hey, look, you're more of those non-double digits in the past as well. So when it comes to 8-4, 9-3 kind of seasons, if you have a 30-team win, 8-4 might get you in. 9-3 is going to definitely get you in on a 30-team at-large season for sure.
I think the question, I agree. I think the question becomes, what is the bottom that people are getting in with? Like, is it bowl eligible? Like, no, but what is it? You know, once we establish that line, I believe it was Josh Pate that said it. I didn't see the whole thing, but I believe what he was saying was Iowa State could be 11 wins again next season, no problem. 9 or 10 wins, like very reasonable. That's kind of the new expectation for Iowa State. So if we take that and also pair that up with what I think that Iowa State is going to be a powerhouse, basically the next Alabama over the next 10 years, I actually think that a 30-team playoff would hurt Iowa State, but that's under the assumption that, you know, this is how good Iowa State is. If Iowa State performs at the level they've been at, Kansas State, I think that it's obviously just more teams are going to get in, higher chance that they make it. But if your team is like that good, right? Like if you elevate to that next level, there is a small piece of me that wonders, like football, those are one game, right? We're not doing a series. So are you going to lose to Kennesaw State? Probably not. But if you go up against, 7-win Boston College, the last pick in, still a pretty solid program. Who's to say things don't just go crazy and all of a sudden you find yourself down 5 with like 5 minutes to go, and it's just a wild situation. Like, I'm just saying that I think if you expand the field that big, it's going to create chaos. Which is that a good thing? Yeah, maybe. But if you're asking me, is that good for Iowa State? I think under those circumstances, probably not. You think Kansas State makes it more often with 30 teams? I probably imagine so.
Oh, they do, 100%. I mean, when you see both these teams are top 25 teams. So, I mean, of course they'd make it with 30. I can just see it now, though. I can see it now. The hypothetical is already starting. Alabama 6-6, and how do they find their way into the 30-team playoff when they're 6-6, and why they are better than 8-4 Indiana or something like that? It's going to happen. No matter what number we finish at, whether it's 32, whether it's 86, whatever the number it is, if it's if it's less than the max number, there's always going to be one team that is fighting to why they should be there. And it's probably going to be Alabama.
Always.
I think we can all agree with that. So there's that.
Well, that's what happened to North Carolina in basketball last season.
West Virginia. Yeah. North Carolina got getting over West Virginia. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They made it, West Virginia. But you see what I'm saying? That last spot in a 68-team tournament?
Yeah.
How big are we going to make that? And that tournament's even being talked about being expanded, which is what?
But that makes more sense to expand because you can play more than once a week. So that, to me, that makes sense. And for the record, there's 300-plus teams. So if you wanted to play the whole percentage game, there's 300-plus basketball. There's only 130. I don't think I'm for expanding anymore. I think I'm kind of on the Chris Kleiman deal. I kind of like what the FCS does, for the record, with their teams. And I think Chris Kleiman's kind of on board there too. We talked about that the other day when it comes to last week. We talked about it. Chris Kleiman likes the 16-team playoff, but no buys. I think that's where I'm like, yeah, give me that. I don't want 30.
I'd be okay with that.
And look, we're going to probably get 16 for 1 year, and then they're going to be ready to expand again because that's all they like to talk about in the offseason of how can they get more money and how can they get more teams in. Because when it's all said and done, it's not about getting fans excited anymore. It's about how much money can we bring in to these conferences. And Hey, for the record, the Big 12 is one of those. So it's not like we can just pretend that it's only the other two conferences, the SEC and the Big 10, doing this stuff. Although we love to do that, it's exactly what's going on. So 30 teams would have been fun to have Kansas State in, Iowa State in. Absolutely. With 30 teams, would the Jayhawks still miss it? Absolutely. So there's just a lot of cool things, right? Iowa wouldn't have made it with, with 30 teams last year. So, it's just interesting. But I personally am going to say no to Mr. Eli from Mizzou. And I just can't see it happening. And you can also put this out here as I continue to ramble on here. How many SEC teams would make it with 30? Like, would they try to make the argument on social media with all those fun SEC trolls out there that like to say, well, the entire conference will make it with 30 teams?
The question is, how many auto bids do they get? Is it a 4-4-2-2-1 expanded? So it's 10-10-4-4? Like, what? How does this look? I could see it being a 13 auto bids for the Big 10 and the SEC because those are the best conferences. So those have to be in. Like, what are we? Yeah, I don't know what the format is, but I bet there's over 10 SEC teams every year. There's 30 teams every year.
Well, if they have that many auto bid teams in, and Oklahoma State still beats Arkansas, and they still can't get a win against any Big 12 school, then we better put 0-9 Big 12 Oklahoma State in that 30-team playoff if they're giving that many to the SEC. Nick, let's get on out of here. Good talk today. Thanks for listening to Farmageddon Friday. We'll be back next week with more Farmageddon Friday. It will be the end of the month for this one, and we'll finish off the positional group talk. We're going to talk linebackers. I think Nick and I have some juicy takes for that. We've been itching to talk linebackers. That's why we saved that one for last. And then guess what? When we're done with that, Nick, we're in the month of August. We're in the month of college football. Plenty of stuff to talk about in the future here. Thank you so much for listening. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been Farmageddon Friday. Iowa or Kansas would not make it in 30 games.
Iowa would have made it the last 30 years.